Good evening and good afternoon and welcome. We will begin our session at 2 minutes after the top of the hour. So there's still time to get yourself something to drink, stretch and breathe. So again, 2 minutes after the top of the hour, we will begin our session. Welcome. For those of you that just joined, we'd like to welcome you. We will start our session at 2 minutes after the top of the hour. Again, welcome. We're glad to have you join us. 2 minutes after the top of the hour. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. We will begin in about another 2 minutes. We want to allow others to join us. So I'll start at 2 minutes after the hour. So again, welcome. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone. Welcome, welcome. We are glad to have you here at our Sumo Logic administration session. My name is Odell Gordon. I am a technical trainer here at Sumo Logic. A little bit background about myself. I've been in IT for about 30 years now. I've played several roles such as database administrator, database designer, a DevOps, and of course, a technical trainer. I enjoy training over the last 15, 20 years. That's where I spend a lot of my time. I'm based here in the Midwest in Illinois here, suburbs of Chicago. It's hot, balmy, 85 degrees. Hopefully you're somewhere comfortable as well. Tonight I have the pleasure of the training manager here at Sumo Logic join us, Josh Brothheim, if you want to join and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Odell. So welcome, everybody. My name is Josh Brothheim, training manager at Sumo Logic. Going to have a good class for you today. I'm going to be handling the chat. So if there's any questions during today's session, go ahead and post them in the chat and I'll answer them. Otherwise, you're in really good, capable hands with Odell. And so let's dive in. Thanks, Odell.
Thank you. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. So what are we going to be covering here? Thank you. Welcome, Francis from San Francisco. Thank you for sharing that with us. So our course agenda today is going to be, we're going to download a file and we're going to use that file for to act as a data source for us. You're going to, again, be using our training environment. We're going to give you user ID for that and password, and you'll be joining it using our training environment. Okay, so again, we'll download one file that's needed for a lab. You and I will then talk about the collectors and metadata, just to get that understanding of what collectors are all about. Then you and I will get into the actual labs and we'll do lab 1, 2, and 3, where we set up a collector with 2 sources, okay? Then we'll come back and I'll discuss optimization tools and overview the administration setup. Then we'll come back and we'll do hands-on labs 4 and 6, installing an app and creating an actual data ingestion alert. You're probably wondering, well, hey, Odell, I don't see labs 5, hands-on labs 5. Well, when we get to lab 4, I'll explain it a little bit more in depth, but essentially, when you were in the fundamentals class, those of you that have joined us here in fundamentals, you've actually taken or done lab 5. So I'll talk more about that when we get to that option, okay? And then lastly, you'll have the ability to go ahead and take the examination and get certified, okay? You've been to most of our courses. I think some of you have been to most of our courses, and you know, we are glad to have you join us. So we are going to reward you with a $15 Uber Eats voucher. I will put this form link when we get to the exam, so you can, of course, pass the exam and fill out the link and get your Uber Eats voucher. Okay, I am going to save some bandwidth here and turn off my video so you can do 1, 2 things. You can focus on the slides and the lecture, okay? All right. So at a high level, we're talking about data flowing, okay? I often ask students to let me borrow your imagination for a minute, and let's imagine that we have a highway, okay? And one end of the highway, we have the Sumo Logic cloud-based environment. On the other end of the highway, we have your logs and your metrics. Somehow we have to get access to your logs and metrics so you can build queries. That somehow is answered by something called a collector. Okay, that collector is going to be where we define sources. It's going to compress, encrypt, and send your logs and metrics into our Sumo Logic environment. That's where you and I will spend most of our time today. in the logical data flow process number 1, creating a collector and defining sources. Now, once we have your data, your logs and your metrics in our environment, you of course can go ahead and search and analyze using operators and displaying your results in different types of charts. Now, if you've taken the search mastery with me yesterday, you know that we went over tons of operators. Okay, and if you haven't taken the search mastery, look forward to taking that. It kind of goes into operators and some real world practical examples. All right, so that's logical data flow number 2. Okay, and then we'll get into logical data flow number 3, where we have found our answers, but the numbers are great, but we would like to visualize it. So we create visualizations, and we'll set up monitoring that allow us to add some alerts and dashboards. So that's the flow. Get your data into our environment, build some searches, and then display it in different display options, and then share it in different visualizations, as well as setting up alerts and creating dashboards. Okay. All right. Now, this slide further breaks down getting your data into Sumo Logic. Okay, and I talked about it. We're going to use something called a collector. Then there's 2 types of collector. A collector is essentially a Java agent, ladies and gentlemen. But there's the 2 types of collectors. There's installed and hosted. Okay, and then based on where your actual logs and metrics are coming from, you're going to either use an installed collector or a hosted collector. Okay. What you're seeing on the screenshot here is our actual collection page, the collection tab, and then you'll see where we will end up going. We'll add a collector or add some sources to our collector. So this actual screenshot down here is actually adding a source to the collector. Okay, and we will go into our managed collections and see all of the collectors eventually. Okay. Again, once we have your logs and metrics in our environment, you can go ahead and build log searches or metric searches, or maybe do a live tail. Okay, again, allowing yourself, you and your coworkers, to actually search through those logs and metrics and find those anomalies, those problems. Okay. And then step 3 here, what we offer here for starting point, and I often recommend this to students as well. If you're new to the tool and you want to kind of start, you don't know how to really get into building queries or dashboards, well, we have a starting point for you. We have some apps that you can install in your environment that has predefined searches as well as predefined dashboards. So that'll help you get started. They're already there for you. All you have to do is sort of plug and play, define it, and things of that sort. We're going to do that coming up. But again, that's part of that visualization and monitoring, creating dashboards, setting up those alerts. Okay. What you're seeing on the screen here is just where our actual app catalog is. And we'll get into that once we get into the actual tool. All right. Now let's go ahead and talk about data collection. Okay. This slide often looks overwhelming when you first look at it, but what you and I are going to do is just divide it in half, straight down the middle here. Okay. Now, again, I asked to lean on your imagination, and I talked about a highway. Okay. Here's further defining that highway. So here is our cloud-based Sumo Logic environment. And here are your logs and your metrics. We have to get your logs and metrics into the Sumo Logic cloud-based environment. So as I mentioned, we're going to divide this slide into halves. There's 2 types of vehicles, okay? The install collector and the hosted collector, okay? Let's take a look at the breakdown over here. One approach that you could use is you could use a distributed installation where you're installing on multiple on-prem servers, okay? So see, we have a Sumo Logic install collector on 3 servers here. So we installed them individually. Now, what that's going to do is encrypt, compress, and send your logs and metrics through the firewall up into the Sumo Logic environment. Again, that's more of a distributed approach where I'm installing a collector on multiple on-prem servers. Another approach, maybe you have a standalone installation, a standalone install collector, okay? And other machines are sending their logs and metrics to that standalone. And it, of course, is encrypting, compressing, and sending through the firewall up into the Sumo Logic environment. Okay, again, this is your on-prem example. Okay, I can do a distributed, or maybe I have a standalone. On the other hand here, the hosted collectors. If your logs or metrics are already in Azure, or maybe they're already in SaaS, Salesforce, they're in the Google Cloud. If it's already cloud-based, ladies and gentlemen, there's no installations, okay? All we need to do is define where your logs and metrics are in your cloud-based environment and make sure we have the actual permissions to actually host it, okay? So there's 2 approaches, and the real takeaway from this slide is the 2 types of collectors. There's installed and hosted. These are the vehicles that are going to get your logs and metrics into our cloud environment. Okay, and all you have to remember is that depending on where your logs and metrics are, if they're in the cloud, you're going to define it, and Sumo Logic is going to host it. If it's on-prem, you're going to add an actual install collector. Again, this slide further kind of gives you the comparative against those 2 collectors, and I sort of, already jumbled that out. Again, an install collector is going to be on the system. It's going to collect your data that's available from those sources. You do have the ability to troubleshoot that collector. You can look at the logs because it's going to log that information of that collector. Okay, so that's an install collector. Versus or whereas a hosted collector, again, Sumo Logic is hosting it. There's nothing to install, so it's agentless. Okay. You can receive logs and metrics uploaded through the URLs. You also can host your sources to collect them seamlessly. Now, we often get the question now, okay, Odell, I know we need a collector, okay? How many collectors do I need? Okay, and we just give you some examples here of some possible solutions here. Okay? You can install a collector on a dedicated machine when you're running a high bandwidth network with high level of logging, high logging levels. Or maybe you require a central location collector to point to many sources. So you saw that one that I showed you, that example. We have one and it's feeding all the actual logs and metrics to it. When would I want to install more than one? And the key takeaway here is these 2 bullet points here. You want to ensure that you install more than one collector if you expect your combined logging traffic for one collector to be greater than 15,000 events, okay? Or if you have some memory or CPU limitations. Other points here are if you expect your collector ingest from greater than 500 separate files, those are instances where you would want to add multiple collectors. Another one is if you have geographically you're separated network clusters or regions. So those are other instances where you could add multiple install collectors. All right, so again, we're defining our hosted versus installed. Again, hosted, you're going to allow for seamless collection. So maybe from your Amazon S3 buckets or your HTTP sources. A hosted collector, you don't require any installation. no activation, okay? On the other hand, okay, again, this is the highway on two sides now, okay? So imagining that. So that's your hosted collector. Now, on the other hand, the install collector, and we're looking at two different approaches here. We have a centralized, where we install that collector on one machine, on-prem, and again, you have multiple servers feeding to it, okay? Then it's gonna, of course, encrypt, compress, and send it. The other approach where you install multiple collectors, okay? And then they'll actually encrypt, compress, and send. Now, there's a few things to consider. Let me go back one step. I just want to remind there's a few things to consider on those install collectors, okay? You want to consider having an install collector on a dedicated machine if, again, you're got that high bandwidth. I just want to remind you of that. Now, let's take a look at our cloud data collection. So here is an approach of we're using a hosted collector, all right? So maybe we want to grab our S3 buckets, as I mentioned earlier, or we want to grab our cloud to cloud connectors, CrowdStrike, Netscope, Duo, okay? What are the benefits of a cloud data collector? Well, again, Sumo Logic is hosting it. You don't have to install any software, and you can configure it with any number of sources. It's agentless. A typical scenario here is customers using the cloud infrastructure. Okay, that's what we're talking about. These source types are normally just part of an overall collection system. So again, we'll use the hosted collector in this example. The local data collection, where we have a collector on multiple machines here. Okay, and here's where we're collecting, let's say we're collecting our operating system, our middleware, maybe we're collecting some network devices or some of our database content, some binary data, whatever we're collecting those source types are. Again, some of the drawbacks of an install collector on multiple machines, it requires no hardware. So again, that's a benefit. It gives you direct access to your logs, which we're gonna need. And it also allows you to provide troubleshooting, because remember, you can look at those collector logs. Some of the drawbacks are it requires outbound internet access. It requires software installation and management, okay? It's usually about 1% of your computer memory, so that collector that you're adding. Some scenarios where you would use that local data collector, if you have a large number of target hosts. Okay? You do not have resources to maintain or build the infrastructure, okay? Or you're comfortable with the target host being connected to the internet. And here's that centralized. Again, this was distributed, so to speak, where you got one on multiple machines, and then here you have that centralized, okay? Again, installing Sumo Logic on a set of dedicated machines. They collect the data from the targets. So again, maybe your Windows events you're collecting on, or your syslogs, or some database content. Again, some of the benefits and the drawbacks here, there's no outbound internet access, okay? You can leverage any existing logging infrastructure. You can scale it. The hardware can be dedicated and failover. Some of that complex issues might be some of the drawbacks, okay? Some of the scenarios for a centralized data collection is not too many target hosts. Maybe you have dozens and not thousands, okay? There are some limitations and concerns in terms of connectivity to the internet for that target host, so be aware that internet connectivity is going to be needed. All right, now, this slide is really to kind of remind you, not only do we collect log information, ladies and gentlemen, we collect metrics. Yes, our tool does do that. There's different types of metrics, your Carbon 2.0, your Graphite, your Prometheus metrics, okay? Your AWS tags, your stack driver metrics. Again, be aware our tool also collects metrics, okay? And we're proud of that as well. All right, now let's talk about our metric ingestion and retention, our DPMs, our data points per minute, okay? Now, each account is given free DPMs, okay? And they're applied by in the administration account, okay? Sumo doesn't ingest metric data that's more than a week old. And that really pertains to the retention policy, okay? Metric data is stored in raw 1 minute and 1 hour resolutions. So when we talk about raw, we're talking about 7 days is the retention plan. If we're talking about 1 minute resolution, we're talking about 30 days is the retention plan. And then finally 1 hour, again, we'll keep it for 13 months. All right, let's take a look at some metadata design. Now, if you've been with class with me already, you already know about our metadata tags, and one of our favorite and most often recommended metadata tag is source category. If you haven't been in class with me, you'll notice that this one is in bold. That's our recommended approach. We'll use that one most often. Essentially, this tag can be freely configured. So for example, I can set up a underscore source category equal to labs Apache access, prod Apache era, labs Akia, and so forth. Okay, so I can freely configure that. And this will make sense as we start breaking it down further in the next couple of slides. What you're seeing on the screenshot here is we have expanded an actual collector, and there's actually 8 actual sources defined, but we only have a screenshot of 2. Okay, but it also tells you here. So I'm looking at the actual collector name, how many sources are defined under it, any activity in the last hour, and any messages. Okay. Here's that example I was alluding to. So when you want to talk about source categories, here's some best practices for you. You want to use a nomenclature where you're beginning with the least descriptive and going to the highest level grouping and getting more descriptive. For example, if your environment is based on prod, UAT, or dev, you might have prod, my app, Apache access. Again, that least descriptive to the highest level and so forth. Maybe it's an application name, Tomcat, Catalina out, I want my out logs. Maybe it's AWS regions, AWS East, I want my Azure logs. Or maybe it's my business unit. I want to grab those Salesforce logs from the sales group, okay? Now, some other benefits of using a nomenclature for your source categories is you'll be able to define the scope of those searches. And what we mean by that is you can filter to a specific area of partition, for example. Again, you can partition your data. You can use our role-based access control where you can set up who can see what. So that's part of using a category naming convention from the least descriptive all the way down. You'll have some benefits outside of just the actual approach to grabbing the source, okay? Right now, what we're going to do now in this lab coming up is you and I are going to go ahead and we're going to first install a file. We're going to download a file. That's the first thing we're going to do, okay? That file is going to be used to create one of our sources, okay? After we download that file, we'll then create a collector. We'll then use that file that we download to create one source, and then we'll create another source. Okay, so that's going to be our goal here. I'll give you the credentials. Again, you need to be aware, if you've been in class with me before, that we're using a different user ID and user ID here. We're actually using the actual admin ID. Okay, so I would like for you to think of a 3-digit number from 1 to 999. You're logging into our training environment, okay? And we're going to allow you to utilize our training environment because we know that environment. We're comfortable with it. We know the data, etc. We don't know your production environment. Those of you that have been in class with me before, thank you for putting your number in the chat window. If you all could put your number in the chat window, that would be awesome. Appreciate that. I'll go ahead and demonstrate logging in while you're putting your items in the chat window as well. So of course, you're going to go to a browser and type in service.sumologic.com. And it's probably going to keep me logged in. Let me log out real quick. And then once you get to your service.sumologic.com, you're going to go ahead and use the training, the plus symbol, the admin, and your 3-digit number, okay, at sumologic.com. Again, you're logging into our training environment, okay, and then the password here is going to be with a uppercase M. That'll be metrics 2022 exclamation mark. Thank you all for putting your 3-digit number in the chat window. Once you have your 3-digit number, you log in. Please confirm that you logged in by either raising your hand or saying it in chat. And it's metrics, so make sure you don't do like me and fat finger it. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Rakim. Thank you, Marcos. Okay, thank you all. If you're having any issues logging in, please let us know so we can make sure we don't leave you. All right, thank you, San. All right, so hopefully everyone is logged in. You're in our CIP environment. If this is your first time in the environment, I just want to just quickly let you know. Again, you may have came in and you saw Sumo Logic and the 3 lines. That collapses our navigation. If you click on the 3 lines, excuse me, that expands our navigation. So you see our navigation panel. The arrow pointing to the left will collapse it, okay? We are gonna spend some time in our main menu, so be aware of that as well, okay? If you recall being in the class with me yesterday and the day before, we actually went to our home tab, our learn link, and down we utilize the fundamental labs. Now you and I are gonna utilize the administration labs, okay? Thank you, Deepak. Gang, are you in? I see your number. Let me know if you're in or not. All right, so again, ladies and gentlemen, you're logged in and we are about to click on the introduction. Again, I'll do that. Thank you, Deepak. We'll click on the introduction here, and all that does is confirm to you that we're logging into Sumo Logic's training environment, okay? We are gonna click on lab number 1, search basic metadata keywords. No, that's not that's not the lab 1. Install a collector is lab 1, installing a collector. And just in case there's someone that cannot get to the labs, just in case, I'll put that in the chat window for you. And let's go ahead and have it. All right, so again, we get you see in the lab 1, it kind of gives you that screenshot of, hey, this is what you're about to do, okay? You're gonna create a collector. First, we're gonna download a file. So if you're following along with me, I'm going to lead you through these labs. You'll see it says, before you begin, All right. We want to download a file. Okay. If you click on the file and it shows you the data, that's not what you want to do. Okay, so you can close that. Some of you may have done that already. Prince, the lab is actually right on the, when you log in, if you've logged in already, you're going to click on the home tab. Okay, very good. Yes, sir. Scroll bar. I'm sorry. Yeah, use the scroll bar. Okay. All right, and go ahead and click on lab number 1. All right, so you can right click on this Apache Access Logs tutorial. We will use it later as a source and save it. Okay. And I'm gonna take that number off of there and hit there. Okay, yeah, replace that. All right. So hopefully everyone was able to download. We can move on to installing a collector. Okay. As I mentioned in the slide, it doesn't give you the save option. Okay. Yeah, go ahead and try that, Zach. Try that as well. Yep. All right, so again, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go back to our CIP. And I often forget to remind everyone, if you're in a Google Chrome environment, you can go ahead and pin your tabs, okay? So you can right click on the tab and pin it. The advantage of that is it allows you to easily toggle between the labs and the actual CIP, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and add an install collector. So I'm following these steps here under install collector. Let's go into the CIP, make sure your navigation panel is visible. We're going down to the main menu. We're going to click on manage data. We'll click on the collections link under manage data. Now, if this is your first time in the actual collections, I just want to point out a few things. Right now, you're seeing all of the collector names expanded, and you're seeing all the sources under them. So all of them are done. So it looks sort of overwhelming when you first get in here. But what you can do easily is just go up to where you see the phrase expand. Right now, all is expanded. You can click on none. So that sort of collapses things to kind of give you a better look on what you're viewing here. Okay. All right, so again, our goal was to create a collector. So we'll see in the top right corner, the add collector link. Let's go ahead and click on that. Let's go ahead and click on installed collector. Now, I am running on a Mac, so I am going to use the Mac OS. If you're running on a different operating system, it should be listed here, okay? So maybe you're running on the Windows 64-bit, or maybe you're on Linux, okay? So again, I'm going to click on the installer of choice, whichever environment you're running on. It's going to download, and once it completes the download, we can go ahead and double click on it to have it to execute. Right. All right, almost done here, and we will begin to double click on the Sumo collector. And we can close out of the add collector here. Give it a moment. It's going to ask you for some credentials once you go through the wizard, but give it a moment. So my collector is now opening. I am now going to double click on Sumo Logic collector install. Let us know if you're having problems here. So you'll see it go through the wizard of installing the different pieces of the actual Sumo Logic collector. Again, you're going to need to have permissions on the machine that you downloaded that on. It's going to ask you to get your credentials for installations. All right. Now, once you go through the installation, please wait for me. There's some steps that I want to kind of point out to you. So if you get ahead of me, please be patient. I want to kind of lead you through some areas. And we should be prompted shortly. Yours may be running faster than mine. One of my cohorts here at Sumo Logic says, yeah, we give Odell the slowest machine. So no worries here. And we're waiting on that installer, and it should be up shortly. There you go. So I get prompted to allow the collector to install. So I need to have the credentials of my machine. Again, you probably had that already. Yeah, Rakim, if you could just wait for a second. You've gone ahead. So if you can just wait for a second, I will get you there what you need. So un momento, por favor. Yes, sir. Thank you for your patience. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you get your collector installed, just kind of wait. There's a set of questions it's going to ask you, and I want to be able to get everyone on the same at the same time. Okay. So notice here it prompts us. Yeah, Prince, if you could just wait there for a second, I'll be there in 1 minute. Okay. I'm in the install collector setup wizard. I'm going to click next. What I wanted to point out to you all, ladies and gentlemen, is the actual name of the collector. Actually, after we click on agreement, so again, you're going to accept and then the agreement and click next in the wizard. It is going to install it in a specified location or applications. You can always browse that and change that if you wanted to, but we'll leave it as it is and click next in the wizard. And then it's going to prepare to install. Okay. Again, I know some of you are way ahead of me. Just again, please be patient. There's things that I want to point out to you so you'll be aware of. Okay. Patience is a virtue. We'll get it going shortly. All right, so it's starting to extract my files and get the process rolling. Some of you may be experiencing the same thing. Again, you understand my struggles. And extracting, we will go. We're almost there, Zach. I'm installing, so I'll be there shortly. If you could just hold on a second right there at the token. So everyone that's at the token already, just be patient. Oh, no worries, Zach, you're fine. You're fine. It's good to have multiple machines. All right, so it's gonna end up finishing and then it will. Yeah, that's understandable, Zach. Yeah, work machines are kind of locked down, so to speak. So after mine finishes up, it's gonna give me all of the information that it downloaded. I'll see the actual machine name and stuff like that. So as I mentioned here, here's the collector name. It's actually using my machine name, okay? What I wanted to point out to you, ladies and gentlemen, is you can go into the advanced settings. And if you wanted to, you can actually change the collector name. Okay, so right now mine is reading Odell Mack, okay? I'm going to leave everything as it is. You also have the ability to set up the proxies, any sources that you want to define, but these are the defaults. It's using default items right now. Just be aware of that, okay? So I'm clicking next in the wizard. If you're following along with me, if you're ahead, I'm going to catch up with you shortly. I'm clicking next in the wizard. Now, here you are, okay? You're prompted. Now, for those of you that were ahead of me, you have a choice for security using a token or an access key. We're going to use an access key because a token you can only use once. We might want to reuse our information for our access key. You're only going to be able to use a token once. So let's click on the radio button for access key. Okay, we're in a wizard mode, so let's click next. Okay, now it should be prompting you for an access ID and an access key. Let's go back to the CIP, the Continuous Intelligence Platform, okay? And let's make sure your navigation panel is extended. Let's go down to the main menu, that darker shaded area. And let's click on the user ID that you logged in as, training, admin, whatever number. Let's click on that user ID down in the main menu. Let's go ahead and click on the preferences under that training ID. And what you'll notice here is you're looking at your profile, you're going to add an access key, the blue over to the right, that blue button. Let's go ahead and click on that. Let's give our access key a name. So let's call it AK for access key underscore, and let's put our initials. And I'm gonna go ahead and put the date here. You don't have to do the date, but at least put your initials, please. Okay. So all we're doing right now, ladies and gentlemen, is we're creating an access key so we can utilize it to connect to the actual CIP. So let's go ahead and click on the phrase create key. Now, let me also point this out, ladies and gentlemen. If your company has a library for your access keys, you want to go ahead and grab that access key right here, right now, and put it in your company's library. If they have a process or procedure like that, you want to do it because you won't be able to see that key when we go look and edit the access ID. Okay, so again, if you need to use this, this is just for information. If your company has a library where they're keeping all the access keys, you want to grab it now at this point. Anyhow, I digressed for a moment. Let's go ahead and over to the right where it reads access ID, we can click on copy. That copies it to memory. Let's go back to our Sumo Logic collector setup steps and let's paste in our access ID. Let's go back over to the access key creation and let's copy the access key. Go back over and paste the access key. These are the credentials the tool is going to use to attempt to connect to the Sumo Logic environment. So you're in a wizard mode. You've populated the 2 choices. Let's click next in the wizard. Now it's going to go through and try and connect. And if you could indicate in the chat window if you have connected successfully, that would be awesome. Or when you have connected successfully. Good job, Zach. Okay, Deepak, awesome. You guys are awesome. Rakim, good job. Awesome. Okay, everybody's able. Prince, you're good. Okay. Give me a minute. I'll be there shortly. So for you guys, that was pretty painless. You were able to create your first collector. I'm going to go ahead and show you some things about it shortly. Mine usually takes just a little bit longer, but it'll eventually connect. After we complete these steps, we'll then go ahead and start to create sources. Hopefully most of you have also connected already. I see 4 of us in the class have, which is awesome. Yep. And I have a lot of security on my machine, so it's probably going through a lot of ups, hills to get through, but it'll eventually get there. Is anyone else connected? I see only 4 of us connected. Anyone else have any problems connecting? Awesome. Mine usually what happens with mine, it kind of times out. It's going to give you a timeout pop up if you're having the same issue that I have. Then I'll click it again. You don't have to be mindful of the actual access key because it'll still be in there. And I'll try it again and it'll work. So it usually happens to the best of us. Okay, gang, good. Mine finished right after yours. So gang, I think you were the key. So mine finished right after yours. All right, so hopefully others, again, be patient. It'll eventually finish. Hopefully you'll get to this point as well. All right, so once we click finish here, we can go over to the CIP and take a look and search for our collector. All right, let me close out of here and go back over here. All right, you can click done on the adding the access key screen. You can click done on that. And we want to go over to our main menu again. We want to go click on the manage data link. And we'll click on the collections sublink. And again, there's so many of the collectors here. What you can do is click at where you see the magnifying glass, that's your search area. And I'm just gonna type my name. So if you remember what yours was called, you can type it and search for it. Hit the enter key and search for it. So here's mine, okay? Notice it has that drop down arrow, but there's nothing underneath it, ladies and gentlemen. We've only created the actual vehicle, the mechanism that's gonna get your logs and metrics into our environment. So hopefully everyone sees their collector, okay? All right, let's go back to our lab steps and see where we left off here. So we added the collector there. We went through the process, scrolling down, still in lab 1. We generated a key and we clicked to finish, okay? We then looked at it. So good work, you've completed these tasks for lab number 1, okay? We downloaded a static Apache log file to our machine and we installed a collector on our machine. Okay, let's go ahead and go to add a source in lab 2. Okay. Now, what we need to do in our environments is that file that we downloaded, we need to move it to, if you're on a Mac, you need to move it to the TMP directory. If you're on Windows, you need to move it to the temp directory. Again, so you can have access to that actual file. So if you follow the steps, which I am going to do as well, I'm going to open up my Finder on my Mac, and then I'll go to the actual folder. So give me a moment here. I'm opening up here, and let me maximize this. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the Go option and then go to folder, go to my temp folder. Oops, I need to go to the download folder again. Sorry, we need to copy the file first. So I'm going to copy the Apache access file. So let's copy it. You can move it as well if you want to. And then you want to go to the go to folder, and you can type in TMP, and then you want to paste. Again, it needs to have access, so it's going to use that temp directory. Okay, let's get back to the lab steps. So we copied or moved that file over. Okay, now we're going to create an Apache log source. So that's why that file was actually needed, so we can use it as a source. Now that you set up a collector on a machine in an environment, we can add a source. So we're going to go find our collector. If you still don't have it found, we're going to find it, and then we're going to use add source. Okay, so let's go back to the CIP. Here's my collector name. I'll go over to the right. There's an add link. I'll click on that. It prompts me, do you want to use a source or script? We'll choose a source. And of course, you guys know it's a local file, but you have other sources here, but be aware, it's a local file. That's what we're going to choose. And just so we follow along, we want to name it Apache logs with our initials. If you want to copy the actual file path, you can from the steps here. Make sure when you're copying it, you don't include the period at the end of the sentence. So again, Odell, what are we doing? We're defining the actual local file source that we're using for a collector, for one of our collector sources, okay? So again, we're gonna go back to the CIP. We're going to name it Apache with our Apache logs with our actual initials. Okay. You don't have to add the date like Odell's doing. if you copied from the actual lab steps, you want to paste in your actual file path. That's where it's going to go grab that file from. Okay. We then want to go ahead and give it a source category. We will use prod Apache access. So just to recap, we gave our actual new source a name. We called it Apache logs with our initials. We specified the file path. It's in the temp directory. And we specified a source category. Okay. At the bottom of the screen, you can go ahead and click Save. And what you should now see under your actual collector name is a new source. You can see that it's healthy. You can see the actual source category name. And you'll notice when you hover over the source category name, you can actually click on the open in the log search. Now, this is going to take a moment for it to actually give you some actual data, but you can always come back. If you get a pop-up message, you can always click skip there. Zach, you say, where do I open the source again? So again, you go to your collections and you click on add a source. Okay, and when you click on add a source, you're choosing local file. Does that help? And once you add that source, you're going to name it, give it a temp file, and give it a source category. Does that help you, Zach? Okay. All right, so hopefully everyone has been able to actually create their first source. They were able to launch a log search. Again, it's going to take some time to show you some results. So we could come back and look at this a little later. All right. Going back to our actual lab guide. So we completed that process. We added the source. We also launched the log search. So do you remember your host name, Zach? So ladies and gentlemen, we just completed lab 2. Let's go ahead and insert a break here. So I'll go ahead and insert a 5-minute break and we'll see you in 5. Zach, I'm going to stay on and help you.